Jessica Caldwell and Richard Monroe held a secret so twisted, so appalling, that even the most hardened investigators struggled to believe it. Jessica was a 25-year-old rising star in the Florida legal world, a brilliant, ambitious judge admired for her intellect and authority. Richard was a decorated Marine, a man once respected for his service but now tarnished by a dishonorable discharge. To the world, their relationship seemed odd, an unlikely pairing that sparked whispers. But behind closed doors, they were something far more sinister. They were lovers, they were family, and together they were murderers. When Jessica's entire adoptive family died within weeks, her mother from a sudden fall, her father from an apparent suicide, and her brother in a freak accident, sympathy poured in for the young judge. The tragedies were dismissed as cruel coincidences, and no one questioned the grieving daughter. No one except a relentless investigator who saw through the facade. As he pieced together the shattered fragments, he uncovered a truth so horrific that it would haunt the nation. Jessica hadn't just killed for love. She killed for power, money, and control. And she believed she was too smart to ever be caught. Jessica Caldwell was a name that carried weight, an image of hard work, dedication, and success. Adopted as a baby by Michael and Susan Caldwell, she was raised in an affluent neighborhood, surrounded by love and opportunity. She excelled academically, earning scholarships and blazing a path to the bench at an age when most were just starting their careers. But beneath the polished exterior lurked a darkness no one could see, an obsession that grew like a malignant shadow. For as long as she could remember, Jessica was tormented by one question: who were her biological parents? The Caldwells had given her everything, but a void gnawed at her, an emptiness she couldn't ignore. At 18, she began a secret search, hiring private investigators and scouring sealed records. Years passed before she found him. Richard Monroe, a disgraced veteran whose life had crumbled after a violent incident cost him his career. A man hardened by failure and desperation. Their first meeting was nothing Jessica had imagined. The connection was instant, unsettling, an unspoken bond that defied explanation. What should have repulsed her only drew her closer. Richard wasn't just her biological father. He was a missing piece of her soul, an embodiment of the darkness she had always felt but never understood. The lines between father and lover blurred, twisted by obsession. What began as a desperate search for answers became a forbidden infatuation, a descent into something far more sinister. Jessica abandoned her adoptive family, cutting ties with the people who had loved her unconditionally. Richard's influence consumed her, feeding her darkest desires. When the couple announced their marriage, the Caldwells were horrified. Shock turned to desperation as they pleaded with Jessica to see reason, to seek help. But she had made up her mind. No one understood her like Richard did. Her obsession was more than emotional. As a former Marine, Richard was still entitled to VA benefits despite his dishonorable discharge. Jessica, with her sharp legal mind, saw an opportunity. A future of wealth and power lay within her reach, if only her adoptive family wasn't in the way. The Caldwells' disapproval became an obstacle, and obstacles needed to be removed. The idea crept into her mind like a slow poison. At first, it was just a whisper, an intrusive thought. But the more she dwelled on it, the more sense it made. The Caldwells were a threat to her relationship, her ambitions. If they were gone, no one would question her marriage to Richard. She would be free. Her mother's death came first, a fall down the stairs, tragic but plausible. The grieving daughter consoled herself with cold resolve. Her father's death followed, a staged suicide that left the community mourning a man, broken by grief. Her brother's car accident was brutal and swift, leaving no witnesses. 3 deaths, 3 tragedies, each one calculated, ruthless. Jessica played the part of the devastated daughter with chilling perfection. Her status as a respected judge silenced any doubts, but arrogance bred mistakes. A tenacious detective, driven by a hunch, began to piece together the deaths, the connections. What he uncovered was a macabre tale of betrayal, manipulation, and greed. Jessica Caldwell wasn't just a judge. She was a killer, a woman who slaughtered those who loved her for power, wealth, and a twisted bond that defied comprehension. The nation watched in horror as the truth emerged. The young prodigy, the ambitious judge, was a cold-blooded murderer who had believed herself untouchable, but she was wrong, and the darkness she embraced would be her undoing. No one could have imagined the darkness lurking behind the poised, brilliant young judge. Jessica Caldwell had spent years mastering the intricacies of the law, every loophole, every technicality. Now, she would wield that knowledge not for justice, but for murder. She was a perfectionist, and if she was going to eliminate her adoptive family, there could be no mistakes. The plan had to be flawless. Jessica understood that sudden disappearances or violent deaths would draw suspicion, especially in a close-knit, affluent community where the Caldwells were well respected. No, it had to look natural, tragic even, so that grief would smother doubt. She observed their routines, their habits, their weaknesses. Her mother, Susan, relied on medication for high blood pressure, a vulnerability Jessica could exploit. Michael, her father, was predictable to a fault, following a rigid daily schedule. She tracked every detail, rehearsing the scenarios over and over until the plan was airtight. The invitation was an act of reconciliation. Jessica reached out, her voice trembling with regret. She played the role of the prodigal daughter, apologizing for her choices and begging for a second chance. Desperate to believe their daughter wasn't lost forever, the Caldwells accepted. They arrived at her home, cautious yet hopeful, met by an elegant dinner, expensive wine, and a daughter who seemed genuinely repentant. The performance was flawless. Jessica watched them relax, sip their wine, oblivious to the sedative she'd slipped into their drinks. It wouldn't kill them, only weaken them. Susan's eyes grew heavy first, a confused glaze settling in as she slumped forward. Michael's speech slurred, panic flickering across his face as he realized something was terribly wrong. But by then, it was too late. Jessica dragged their limp bodies to the garage where Richard waited. He had resisted the plan at first, the weight of murder hanging heavy on his conscience. But Jessica knew how to manipulate him, how to twist his desires and fears until he was complicit. She whispered promises of wealth and power, painting a vivid picture of their future, and he pushed down his guilt. They staged Susan's death with clinical precision. Jessica positioned her in the driver's seat of her car, slumped forward, the scent of spilled wine on her clothes. The crash was brutal, deliberate. A tragic accident, authorities would say. Michael's death was a different matter. They arranged his body in the backyard, a gun loosely clutched in his hand. Jessica placed a forged suicide note nearby, grief-stricken words of a man who couldn't bear life without his wife. The narrative would write itself. When police arrived, Jessica played her part, trembling, tearful, wrapped in Richard's arms. She wept as she recounted her father's despair, her mother's struggles. No one questioned her. A judge with a sterling reputation, a devastated daughter. The case closed swiftly, but Jessica wasn't safe yet. Her younger brother Daniel had never trusted her. He had seen through her mask long before their parents died, seen the coldness creeping into her eyes, the way she discarded people once they lost their usefulness. After the deaths, his suspicions hardened. He challenged the official reports, questioned the inconsistencies, but without hard evidence, police dismissed him, a grieving young man in denial. Jessica, however, saw the danger. He was relentless. If he kept pushing, someone might listen. Daniel's death had to be quick, clean, and irreversible. An accident, tragic, unfortunate, but he was careful, wary. She couldn't rely on chance. So she laid the groundwork, chipping away at his resolve. And the brilliant young judge, who thought herself untouchable, would realize too late that even the perfect crime can unravel. Jessica Caldwell's cold determination had carried her this far. Manipulation was an art, and she was a master. Tearful phone calls, the grieving sister desperate for family, for comfort. She played on his guilt, feigned vulnerability, painted herself as a broken woman struggling to cope. When the moment was right, she invited him out, to remember their parents, to bond again. Daniel was hesitant, distrustful, but Jessica persisted, weaving guilt and desperation until he agreed. The night was cold, the road slick with rain. Jessica steered the conversation toward painful memories, kept his glass full, and watched his guard crumble. That night, as she coaxed her brother Daniel into drinking far more than usual, she kept her own sips controlled, her mind sharp. The alcohol loosened his tongue, but it dulled his senses, just as she'd planned. When he insisted on driving himself home, she feigned concern, offering to call him a ride. Predictably, he refused, pride and stubbornness sealing his fate. She followed him out of the bar, headlights dimmed, eyes locked on his unsteady vehicle as it weaved along the dark, winding highway. It was a perfect stretch, isolated, no streetlights, flanked by looming trees. Timing was crucial. When the moment came, she surged forward, her high beams blazing into his rearview mirror. Disoriented, Daniel swerved, tires screeching. Jessica accelerated and nudged his car's rear bumper, just enough. The car spun out, metal twisting as it flipped, crashing into a ditch. Glass rained down, smoke billowed, and silence settled in the aftermath. Jessica parked at a distance, watching. She didn't rush to help, didn't call for aid. She waited, eyes unblinking, until stillness confirmed his death. Then, with a trembling, calculated voice, she called 911, her panic rehearsed. Daniel was dead. Another tragic accident, another obstacle erased. With her parents and brother gone, Jessica finally had the wealth and power she craved. Life insurance payouts, estate money, and her father's VA benefits began to pour in. She and Richard basked in luxury, designer clothes, lavish vacations, a sprawling estate. But the shift was too drastic, too fast. Her new life gleamed too brightly. Friends whispered, colleagues exchanged wary glances. Yet Jessica dismissed them all, too arrogant to see the danger. Then came Ethan Cole, a claims investigator for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Officially, it was a routine review, but years of sniffing out fraud had honed his instincts. The timing of Michael Caldwell's death, a suicide mere hours after his wife's accident, stank of deception. Ethan dug deeper, tracing sudden wealth, analyzing phone records, cross-referencing surveillance footage. The cracks began to show. Jessica was too absorbed in her success to notice the quiet investigation. When word of Ethan's inquiries reached her, she brushed it off. She had outsmarted everyone who could have challenged her. A mere investigator posed no threat, she was untouchable. But Ethan wasn't just a man on a job, he was a hound on a scent. What started as a hunch unraveled. A web of lies and death. This was no fraud, this was murder hiding behind coincidence. Jessica had meticulously orchestrated every move, but she failed to account for a relentless man with nothing to lose. Her belief in her own brilliance had been absolute. But Ethan Cole's investigation was methodical, driven by instinct and experience. For weeks he pieced together a puzzle others had overlooked. Discrepancies in Jessica Caldwell's statements, inconsistencies in the official reports, and financial anomalies that reeked of deception. But suspicion alone wasn't enough. He needed irrefutable evidence. His breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a traffic sensor. Jessica had been confident there were no security cameras along the dark stretch of highway where Daniel Caldwell had crashed. She was right about the cameras, but wrong about the sensor. It recorded two vehicles speeding close together that night, Daniel's car and another just behind him. The license plate of the second vehicle was registered to her. It wasn't proof of murder, but it was enough to justify a deeper look. Ethan brought his findings to the state prosecutor, who hesitated. Accusing a well-respected judge of orchestrating multiple murders could ruin careers if the case wasn't airtight. But Ethan pressed on, revealing forged VA benefits documents, suspicious bank statements, and the unexplained influx of wealth. The mounting evidence left the prosecutor no choice but to authorize a formal investigation. It began with a quiet subpoena and a surprise visit from federal agents. Jessica kept her composure, weaving lies with practiced ease, dismissing inconsistencies as clerical errors and financial discrepancies as misunderstandings. But she felt it, an itch of fear creeping beneath her confidence. The investigation was tightening around her, and she was running out of time. Then came the exhumation order. Investigators dug up her parents' bodies, determined to find the truth. The new toxicology reports were damning. Sedatives in their systems, the telltale marks of a staged accident. The truth was undeniable now. Jessica scrambled to cover her tracks, but desperation made her sloppy. Richard, once her eager accomplice, cracked under the pressure. Terrified of becoming her next victim, he struck a deal. In exchange for leniency, he confessed to everything, helping stage the accidents, forging documents, and standing by as Jessica coldly manipulated and killed her way to wealth. The trial was merciless. The judge who once passed sentences on criminals now faced the same justice she once dispensed. The jury saw through her charm, stripping away the mask to reveal a woman who calculated every move with chilling precision. The verdict was swift, guilty on all counts. As the judge pronounced her sentence, life without parole, Jessica's expression remained blank. She had always believed she could outmaneuver anyone, but in the end, she was outplayed, the architect of her own ruin.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more disturbing true crime stories. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Let us know what you think. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.